Well, hello and welcome to the Pursuit of Excellence, a special series brought to you by ORBIZ. Now, in this series, we explore the secrets of building a culture of continuous improvement and unlocking your organization's ability to achieve operational excellence. Hello, I'm Paul McCarthy, and I'll be your host today. And I'm joined by Martin McKowen. Martin is a business optimization project manager and coach. He has over 30 years' experience and specializes in driving uh, transformative change through innovation, strategies, and practical solutions. So today I'm going to be speaking to Martin about MOS-X. So first, welcome to the call, Marty.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
So, Martin, maybe in your own words, perhaps you can just give us a quick overview of your career and all the sorts of things that have kept you busy over the last 30 years.
Okay, sure. Actually, I'll go back a little bit before that. Before I came into this field, I spent 13 years in the military. I was a soldier, then I was an officer in the army, then I transferred over to the Air Force and worked in intelligence. And in intelligence, there's a lot of analysis and there's a lot of data collection. So it was almost a natural progression that when I saw an advertisement for a management consultant, even though I didn't know what one was, I applied, did some study, and end up working in Indonesia, working in business improvement and working with people and systems to ensure or make them culturally relevant, but also to have improvement. And my passion is when I see people being successful. So I started with a company in '96, actually, called GPR Daler. And the founder of that company was actually credited with terming the expression management operating systems. And so that's where it first started. And so it became an apprenticeship in management operating systems, sometimes called management systems. And I've even heard some people call it mine operating systems. And there's pros and cons for different terminology. And since then, I've worked with a lot of different companies. A lot of them have been in mining, a lot of them have been in developing countries. I've worked in Indonesia for 12 years, worked in Papua New Guinea for 4.5, and different countries in Africa for a while as well as working in Australia. Every country has its own challenges, including my home country of Australia, and each company has its own culture. And it's necessary to recognize that in order to develop these systems. So since then, I've worked for a number of different consulting companies, including some of the larger ones. And the reason for that was that I like to continue to learn. I like to learn, I like to develop, but as I said, my passion is creating impact through clients.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, our conversation today is about MOS and about MOS-X. So maybe, I guess, for the benefits of our audience, maybe we can
Yep,
just define really what a MOS is
yep.
and the kind of core principles behind it.
Okay. A management operating system is quite simply the way that we manage a value stream. And the management operating system, sometimes called management systems, and I find that quite often people understand the concept of a management system rather than a management operating system, but management operating system, it is often termed. Um, Basically, as I said, it's the way that we manage a value stream, and it normally consists of the different phases of work. And on the basis, there's a planning phase, there's the doing the work phase or the doing phase or the implementation phase. And there's normally a review phase as well. Did we do what we set out to plan? And ideally, that review phase then feeds back into the plan. So that's if you think about the three columns of a management operating system structure. That we've got the going from the bottom up, we've got the different levels, different time levels. So we might have hourly, shift, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, up to life of mine or strategic planning durations. And that way we're able to map an overall process. We're also able to match different work levels by people and positions to that as well. So for example, at an hourly level, it might be the operator or it might be the line supervisor that's responsible for hourly performance. Or at the daily shift level and the daily level, it might be a little the supervisor and foreman, or it might go up to you get to a quarterly, and that's the superintendent level. So we can match work levels as well. So in essence, that's the management system, or the structure of a management system or a management operating system. It has other elements that go along with that as well, which is where the X comes into it. So if we go back, the structure might be termed like the skeleton of a company. Now, the thing is, every company has a management operating system. Sometimes we don't know what it is, but we have it. Normally we have a hierarchy of planning, but we may not know what that is, and we may not have highlighted that. We have a way that we do work. We have a way that we work out if we're doing the right thing in the right time in the right way. That's all parts of the management operating system. Meetings are part of a management operating system. So that's the skeleton of it. We have a skeleton. We may not be able to identify all the different parts of the skeleton. The X side is when we start to link the nervous system, if you like, to that skeleton. And this is where ORBIZ has a key intellectual property, in that it's a lot of the founders of ORBIZ come from a lean background. So being able to apply a lean background or lean principles with the management operating system principles, we end up with having the structure, but also the lean principles, which lead to that continual improvement and elimination of waste. And that comes down to how we design a management system and how we also implement it and how we get people on board. And in essence, that's what a management operating system is.
So in terms of, I guess, developing, so we've got, you like, as you said, some people, I mean, everybody has an operating system, even if they've got one by default, even if they never planned one, they have one because they have a way of doing business. But here, I guess, having a MOS is about being deliberate about it, having the structure. And what we're saying is the X is kind of bringing it to life through lean principles. I guess that obviously one of the things that's happened in the world, Marty, is that lean was for a long time seen as a strategy that was used in manufacturing, particularly in car manufacturing. As you mentioned, a lot of ORBIZ expertise comes from that environment. So what have been, from your experience, I guess, some of the challenges of getting that thinking across into a world that has maybe gone, well, we're not manufacturers, we're miners. So what's your experience been of that?
Yeah, when I first started as I said, in the mid to late 90s, working in Australia and Indonesia especially, if we mentioned anything that sounded lean or had buzzwords associated with it, we would get a major pushback. So we are not a manufacturing operation. So one of the things that we needed to do was maintain the principles of lean, but put it in a way that was intuitive and the language that of the company or the client that we're working with. So we wouldn't use Japanese terminology to describe like Kaizen, so an improvement event. We just call it an improvement event, or we call it continuous improvement. So we had to make sure, and this is where identification of culture is important, to make sure that we understand the culture of the client, and then we'd make sure that the management system was developed in a way that people could look at it and intuitively understand what it meant without having to explain too many concepts, terminology, etc. So as said, is that it's got to be practical and it's got to be simple, and which is one of ORBIZ's principles, is to have simplified processes. Is that likewise we need to simplify the language of the process as well and make it understandable. I guess one of those, just as a bit of an aside, in maintenance, for example, there's a difference between planning and scheduling. So the plan is saying this is what we're going to do, and the schedule starts to put resources, time, and allocating people and locations to it. And that's really important to understand, so that when we talk about, oh, we have a schedule, then we know what the client understands that to be, and that comes down. And quite often when I'm developing a management system, the bottom level where work gets performed, that I will call that a schedule, and we get people to understand it's different from the plan. So yeah, so in effect, we had to be smarter, and we couldn't be dogmatic about, no, a management operating system is this and lean is this. we couldn't do that. We need to understand. So without sacrificing the principles of lean through the identification and elimination of waste. And then you can start to bring in Six Sigma, which is the elimination of waste through making sure that what we do it right the first time. And so we make sure that we're applying our effort in the right way at the right time.
So if we move forward, to mines and other operations, and I guess this is the reality that a MOS isn't just valuable necessarily in a mining environment, but if we're talking about the mining environment for a moment, but so what are, I guess, the modern day challenges outside of language of having to mask lean so that we don't offend anybody or make them think it's something else? What other challenges have you seen with the adoption of developing a MOS-X into an environment?
One of the major challenges I've seen is with digital or information systems, information technology, the belief that a digital solution will solve all the problems. As an example, I was working with a fairly large gold mining company on their SAP implementation, and there was two different areas we're implementing SAP. With one, we're developing the processes that were best supported by SAP, and to look ahead and to make sure that we had the best systems in place, and we had a developed management system, a management operating system in place. Another location was designing or blueprinting their current processes. And what they were effectively doing was that they were automating their current poor performances, their current poor processes. So the processes hadn't changed. It's just that they were doing it badly, but quicker.
Yeah, right.
And so the belief that digital will solve all the answers is part of it. So typically when we're implementing a management operating system, we'll design it first, and then we'll have that followed up by digital to automate the bits that need to be. And that could be, for example, providing timely reporting functions so that we can then do that review activity. And we might want to do it hourly, so we had a short interval control, but we need to have an effective schedule in place. So we need to have an effective scheduling program in place first before we can automate that. And then we implement it. We do the hourly check to see where the variance is, identify the cause of the variance, and then correct those variances. And then we can do that and make sure that we get that reporting in a timely manner. But we need to know what we're reporting and why, rather than just saying, oh, we report this, it's a nice to have. For every variance that we report, there should be an identified or known response to that variance. If this happens, then we need to look at these things. These are the reasons that these variances get caused, and this is what we need to do about it. And likewise, given that we've got infinite activities and finite resources, we also need to understand what the priorities are. And so we need to have systems of prioritization in there as well, so we can respond to the highest priority, highest variances in a timely manner. As one of my principles, you can only manage work at the level at which it's performed. Having a weekly meeting is not going to fix the problems of the previous week. It's like after the game's finished, reviewing the game and saying, oh, we should have done this. No, you can actually review it each quarter or each half or each period to actually say, oh, we're down, this is what we need to do. And you change it for the next period, the next time interval. So being able to do that. So you need to understand the management operating system first and the processes first before digital can actually assume control of that. We need to make digital work for our processes, not the other way around.
Yeah, well, it makes perfect sense. As you say, all you end up with is a faster, bad system, right? So
Yeah.
without it, so it's a great example. Perhaps you could share with us an example of an organisation that has implemented MOS-X successfully, and I guess what sort of impact they experienced once they put that in place.
Yeah, there was a mining company. It was a contract mining company that implemented, in effect, MOS-X, and we had the structure in place. We also had the other routines in place. And we also had an emphasis on training the frontline supervisors in understanding the system. And when we designed it with those people in mind. And one of the cultures, this was overseas, and reading and writing was an issue. So we had to make sure that, for example, the mine plan, the shift plan, had diagrams on it that actually showed what the expectations were for the shift. We had on it the hourly productivity targets, and we'd also set up the dispatch system, the mine dispatch system, with those targets in it as well. We had a system every hour where we'd call out what the performance was for the previous hour, and the supervisors would know where to respond. As a result, we end up with a 36% improvement in productivity in the pit. And it wasn't by doing anything harder or longer. It was just by focusing on the highest priority, highest variance, and then training, having the people in place with their cue cards, and what we called it their smart cards, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to look at this. This is okay. This is bad. This is what I can do to fix it. And as a result, the systems and the people and the equipment work together in order to be able to achieve sustainable improvement. And as a result, we made sure that the increased performance got then fed back into the planning process. So that instead of planning at the old numbers, we then plan at the newer performance, sustainable improvement figures. Mm-hmm. And so that worked really well. We also made sure that the annual planning process had these figures, these assumptions, performance assumptions for each area by equipment in place, and basically a bottom-up planning to say that this is the target, and that cascaded all the way through the plans, from the annual to the quarterly to the monthly to the weekly to the shift. Because it doesn't make any sense to say that we've got an hourly productivity target, let's say of 1,000 tons per hour, but the budget is 1,500. Mm-hmm. We need to understand why that variance is there, and this is what we're going to do to improve on it. So as a result, everybody got involved in performance improvement because it became part of the language of that site. So up until then, we didn't talk about productivity. In fact, some places I've been to, productivity was seen as a dirty word because it assumed that you wanted people to work at a faster rate such that it would be dangerous. But no, it was safe productivity. And so everybody got involved, from engineers to operators to general managers. Everybody was involved in those conversations, and they would start to talk about, what is your productivity rate? What are the delays? What is the waste? What can we do to fix it? And it just became part of the conversation, and it was amazing to see. And then we could step back and say, okay, this is a success. And it still works today. In fact, as an aside, on that project that, as I said, we've developed the smart cards. I actually saw in another part of the world those exact same cards, but with a different company name on them. So the supervisors and the engineers thought they were good enough that they took with them. And to me, that's a sign of success.
Yeah, that's great. So you've perhaps touched on a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. One was about, how does a MOS-X help organizations align their strategic plan with their day-to-day?
Yep. So we've got different impressions of what a management operating system is. So part of it was that it's a set of meetings. It's not. Meetings are part of an overall process. The other part is the alignment. People talk about Hoshinkanri, which is basically the cascading of strategic guidance, strategic initiatives through the system. The management operating system, and having the planning system, the planning hierarchy in place, allows lean systems like Hoshinkanri to be cascaded through the organization and factored in. They work closely together. If we don't have that system, if we don't have a cascaded planning process, cascaded and hierarchy of plans, then Hoshinkanri finds it very hard to work. It's the same with OKR, objective and key results. We need to have the systems in place, the skeleton, so that those signals of the nervous system can make it from the head down to the work. So we need to have that in place. So that's So we need to have that in place. Now, you can have a management system just at the bottom level. However, you don't have long-term direction, like the development of the mine or the development of the company, etc. You may be very good at manufacturing one thing, but we need to make sure that it's the right thing that we're manufacturing. And this is where Six Sigma comes into it. We can't manufacture the wrong thing. So yeah, it does have that cascade from the strategic guidance all the way down to that frontline operator.
Yeah, it makes sense. And how does it connect, I guess, the MOS with fostering a culture of continuous improvement? And you mentioned, in terms of perhaps sometimes, and I actually saw this in a LinkedIn post of someone where there was a conversation going on about lean, and somebody had commented, "Oh, lean is just kind of an excuse to make people work really hard," And I thought, oh, it's interesting how people's wiring sometimes is that they have this bias thinking it's just about how to get more and more out of people. But as you said, it was about productivity, performance. But how do you get, I guess, everybody on board and aligned with that from a cultural point of view?
Well, part of the culture is the conversation, as I said, is that, but we also, with the management operating systems, having the systems in place and giving people the forums to be able to discuss improvement, to identify variance and improvement. So that's why we've got plan, do, review. Now, quite often, a lot of companies would just do plan, do, plan, do, plan, do. So they'd plan it, they'd do it, but then they'd just come in the next day without reviewing performance. And you're not going to have continuous improvement then. So it's a conscious effort to step back and say, okay, let's review what we did. Now, if we're doing it on an hourly or 2-hourly basis, that's short interval control. If we're doing it shift or daily, and normally daily, then you have that report, and that the report is produced, but then it needs to be reviewed. I don't know how many places I've been to that produce a report, but it's just, oh, yeah, that's nice. But that doesn't get looked, doesn't get analyzed. So it's about making it part of the routines of the day. So the routine is that where you come in, you set up for the work, you do the work, and there might be a review process. And the review process is, we didn't meet target here. These are the reasons why. And as during the shift, if we're doing short interval control and reporting variance and the causes of variance during the shift, and this doesn't have to be for mining, it can be for anything. You could be making widgets on a production line, is that during 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, we only achieved half of it. And it could have been for whatever reason. But analyzing that this is the variance, what do we need to do about it? What can we do differently? What can we do better? So it's about making sure that we have opportunities for those conversations to happen. The other side too is that when we're planning, and this is talking about the higher level down to the lower level, when we're doing the annual budget, we need to make sure that we're building in improvement initiatives, improvement projects. Now, there's a number of different categories of initiatives that you might have. And one might be an aspirational target. So, for example, the annual budget might say we need to improve performance from 1,000 tonnes per hour to 1,200 tonnes per hour. So that would be an aspirational improvement. So we need to improve that. So you need initiatives to work out how and implement how are we going to achieve that extra 200 tonnes per hour. But if you're only performing at 800 tonnes per hour, you've got a remedial initiative. You need to say, well, how do we get to the 1,000 to start off with? And then how do we get to the 200? And they need to be built into that weekly and daily and even hourly schedule. So if you're taking engineers out or you're taking equipment out to work on improvements, that needs to be factored into that plan. It can't be do your job, but also we want you to do this other thing. It needs to be factored in. Oh yeah, there's other types of improvement too. There's continuous improvement, good ideas from people, and how do we do better? And there's also workplace enablers as well. Like how do we have a better place to work? Barbecues, how do we have increased safety? How do we have improve the environment? The things that may not directly impact that performance, or maybe it does, but how do we make sure that we have a continual opportunities for people to improve and have those conversations? And that's the most important thing. And that's how I know a place is successful and focused on improvement is the conversations that are had. And I remember one time I was in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and I asked an operator there, and I said, how do you know if you're going to have a good day? He said, I'll get 5 loads from this location, 3 loads from this location, and 2 loads from this other location. Overall, this is how many loads for the day I'll get. And I said, what could get in your way? Could, if this. And he listed 3 things that could get in his way. I checked his timesheet the next day, and he was only out by 1 load. But this was a place where we'd been through and implemented some improvement. And this is part of the conversation. What we thought was interesting, that some of the leaders thought that the operators didn't actually think in this way. They thought they just sat there and operated the equipment, but no, they were thinking about improvement. So how do we harness that? And how do we give them the tools to be able to do that better?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I think that's I remember the old story about the country club, and they had the problem with the members using the showers and taking the bottles of shampoo and conditioner away with them over and over, and they, contemplating all of the solutions and having them mounted on the walls and changing the way they were doing, and and they asked the janitor who managed the bathrooms, any ideas? And he said, yeah, I can fix that tomorrow. No, that's all right. We'll fix it straight away. And he went in, he fixed it, and they never had a problem again. And they said, well, how did you fix it? He said, simple. I just took the lids off the bottles. So nobody
Yeah,
could take them away. So,
yeah,
sometimes the answer's right there if you're willing to ask the staff
yeah,
and the employees what they think, because as you say, they're right at the coalface and they're often thinking of ways that they would like to improve
yeah.
it. You've been really generous with your time, Marty, but just want to last couple of things before we let you go. I guess is what do you see as, I guess, the future for MOS-X evolving? The world's constantly changing. Where's this going to go? And what do organisations need to think about in terms of embracing this, I guess, as we move forward?
Yeah. Well, I guess there's a number of things. One is for people that are implementing or improvements to their management operating systems is to understand their processes first, to have a connected and hierarchy of planning where the assumptions are cascaded, the variances are cascaded, and we're factoring in planning. Then look at how can digital support that, making sure that the systems talk to each other to make sure that the output is in a format that people understand. Now, as much as we like it, we do see a lot of technology being used, and that's going to happen. We need to make sure the technology is usable and is focused on what that position needs. And so they can actually feed that the variances in, they can see their reports, they can see their plans on it, and being able to use that. And I think technology will become much more important. However, we still at this stage need people to be able to see the variances and understand the causes of variance and the intricacies of the system. AI will go part of the way, and that will become even more relevant, but we still need people on the ground to do that. Likewise, we need to make sure that any system that's developed, any review links back into planning. And again, until we're fully automated, we need to have people that understand these processes. And I see that technology is going to have a bigger impact, but it needs to be taught, designed, and developed by people that understand the processes and the variances that could be possible. And we still have a place for people that understand this. So technology isn't going to solve everything, but it's going to help us to be able to solve these things. And I think that's the exciting part about what we see in the world today in all industries, from aviation to high tech to medicine to mining, is that we do see technology supporting the process and not the other way around.
And finally, Marty, if there are people watching and exploring the idea of implementing a MOS-X into their business, perhaps a little reluctant or
Yeah.
hesitating for whatever reasons, what advice would you have for people who are thinking about this and implementing this strategy?
I think the first thing is to understand what they currently have. And it's not that, and we can talk about, ORBIZ, we understand how this works. Getting somebody to do a review of their current systems, of what's currently in place and where the opportunities are. And as mentioned, we've spoken a lot about the structure, but also the tools that are being used, like performance centers. Do we review? Do we analyze? Making sure that we have people trained in problem solving. Get somebody in that does this as their job. Quite often when I first started in mining is that I would tell people I'm not a miner, but I understand systems. And then until I got to the stage where I've been working in mining, and I worked for a number of different mining companies, where one general manager said to me, "Marty, stop this. You're in mining, you're just not a miner." So you need to stop it. So my main advice is take the leap, get somebody that knows about management systems to do an analysis of your operation. So you start with a baseline of understanding of where your opportunities for improvement start. And that way it's not as daunting.
Yeah. Well, Marty, thank you so much for making some time. I know you're only days away from having to jet off again over to Africa and help another organisation to figure out how to implement these strategies into their minds there. So really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to chat and share your wisdom today. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much.